In the winter of 1910, Paris had been receiving a greater amount of rainfall than expected. The ground became supersaturated, and there was flooding in the rivers and streams. The increased amount of rain, and it being winter, increased the flooding. There were mudslides present up the river, yet the Parisians ignored the warnings. Next thing they knew, their city was flooded. The wind and sea did not affect the flooding. The magnitude of the flood was immeasurable in its time, but for 2 months after the flood started, the city of Paris struggled with sewer upwelling and flooding in its subways and city streets. January 28, 1910, the water's highest height recorded hit 28 feet. For weeks, residents were stranded in buildings. The citizens had built such an impermeable city it was devastated by the flooding.
This flood was one of the worst Paris has ever seen. Lasting for over 2 months, the flooding racked up over $1.5 billion in damages to surrounding infrastructure such as homes, government buildings, transportation, and much more. Over 200,000 people were affected by the rapidly rising water and were forced to find shelter in nearby schools and churches. Despite all the damage, not one person died during this major flooding event thanks to police and armed forces that provided aid and built wooden walkways to get over the water. Much of Paris's infrastructure, such as local businesses, were forced to shut down during this time, causing many people to be left without jobs. The flooding did also pose a threat to the water quality in Paris due to much of the sewage systems and underground drainage tunnels overflowing into the streets and spreading chemicals and bacteria throughout the water.
Some adaptation strategies that people used in response to the flooding were government engineers who built wooden walkways, and civilians also used boats. Individuals could use the walkways to navigate through the flooded streets when the train tracks, used for frequent transportation, were submerged. In addition, civilians had to bring blankets into their jobs in the cold winter weather due to electricity not functioning. Paris is prone to these floods, especially during the rainy season. Precautions that they are taking in order to prevent catastrophe from happening is planting new vegetation, educating local populations, building better infrastructure, and more. Overall, the 1910 flood in Paris was a terrible thing that happened for all the people who had to go through it. But this flood also led way for a lot of precautions to be taken in the future for floods to prevent them. Thank you for watching, and we really hope you enjoyed this video.